You won't believe how my new boss fired me, replaced me, and tried to steal my life's work. But he didn't know what was coming to him. With all due respect, Dr. Harris, your methodologies, while foundational, are resource-intensive. We believe we can achieve comparable, perhaps even enhanced diagnostic throughput with newer, more standardized AI protocols. We can onboard 3 new data analysts specializing in off-the-shelf diagnostic AI for less than your current package. Julian Croft, the newly appointed Director of Clinical Innovation at St. Jude's Regional Hospital, offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was less a smile, more a baring of teeth. Nothing personal, Layla, just optimizing our operational efficiency, he added, the corporate jargon rolling off his tongue like perfectly polished, meaningless stones. My name is Dr. Layla Harris. I am 58 years old, and until 10 minutes ago, I was the lead neurodiagnostic architect at St. Jude's for 22 years. I hadn't just joined a department, I had built it. Specifically, I had conceived, developed, and painstakingly refined Project Falcon, a bespoke diagnostic support system for complex, rare neurological disorders. It wasn't just software. It was an intricate ecosystem combining advanced pattern recognition AI, longitudinal patient data analysis, and, crucially, a heuristic overlay based on decades of clinical observation. My decades of observation. It predicted flare-ups, identified subtypes missed by standard tests, and guided treatment pathways with unparalleled accuracy for conditions that baffled most specialists. Across the sterile conference table sat Croft, barely 40, impeccably dressed, armed with an MBA from Stanford and zero clinical background. He'd arrived 5 months prior, parachuted in by the hospital's new private equity ownership group, Brightmore Health Partners. His mandate was clear. Make the prestigious, but notoriously inefficient neurodiagnostic wing profitable. Apparently, that started with removing the highest-paid, most experienced linchpin. Beside him, looking profoundly uncomfortable, was Helen from HR, clutching a folder like a shield. The severance package is quite competitive, Helen murmured, sliding the folder towards me. 3 months' salary, plus vested benefits and accrued leave. I picked up the folder without opening it. My hands felt steady, a deceptive calm masking the tremor deep within. Thank you, Helen. Is there anything else? Croft seemed almost put out, much like Victor's CTO. He likely anticipated tears, anger, threats, something to report back to Brightmore about the difficulty of managing legacy personnel. Well, he began, adjusting his cufflinks, most people have questions about the transition, handover protocols. I offered a slight shrug. It seems straightforward. You have the system access logs, the standard operating procedures I drafted years ago, the ones Brightmore deemed sufficient, despite my requests for dedicated funding to create comprehensive, dynamic documentation and cross-training programs. The barb, subtle but sharp, landed. Croft exchanged a fleeting, uncertain glance with Helen. They didn't understand. This wasn't calm resignation. It was the profound exhaustion of having fought battles for resources, for understanding, for the sheer necessity of nuance in medicine, only to be ultimately dismissed by spreadsheet logic. I was done. Of course, Croft recovered quickly. We would appreciate your cooperation during the transition. The new team, bright young minds from MIT and Caltech, might benefit from your insights into Falcon's historical architecture. Perhaps a short-term consulting contract. I'll consider it, I replied, the words tasting like ash. I knew I wouldn't. We shook hands, his grip firm and brief, mine passive. Clearing out my office was surreal. 22 years of research notes, prototypes of diagnostic interfaces, commendations, faded photographs of former colleagues and grateful patients, all condensed into 2 surprisingly small cardboard boxes. Dr. Ben Carter, my protege whom I'd mentored since his residency 12 years ago, hovered awkwardly at the door. His face was pale. Layla, this is insane, he whispered, glancing nervously down the hallway. Falcon isn't just code. It's you. They don't understand the interpretation layer, the weighting adjustments for atypical presentations. They believe they do, Ben, I said quietly, placing a hand on his arm. Do good work. Focus on the patients. He looked like he wanted to argue, but nodded mutely. As I walked towards the elevators, past the murmuring nurses' station and the hushed quiet of the labs I designed, my hospital-issued pager buzzed. It was a legacy device I insisted on keeping, more reliable than apps in the hospital's notorious dead zones. A text alert from Ben. Croft just announced the new team. They're talking about unlocking Falcon's commercial potential. What does that even mean? I didn't reply. Home was a quiet house overlooking a sprawling, meticulously kept garden, my sanctuary. My husband, Samir, a retired history professor, met me at the door, his expression telling me he already knew. He simply held me for a long moment. Later, sitting on the patio with steaming mugs of chai, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet, he asked the inevitable question. What now, Layla? I don't know, I admitted. Something will turn up, I suppose. What Julian Croft, Brightmore Health Partners, and their team of bright young minds didn't grasp, what they hadn't bothered to investigate beyond surface-level code reviews, was the true nature of Project Falcon. It wasn't just an algorithm, it was a dynamic, evolving diagnostic partner. Its core AI learned, yes, but its true power lay in the intricate, constantly updated heuristic overlays I programmed myself, directly translating subtle clinical insights and pattern variations from ongoing cases. These weren't documented in traditional software manuals because they couldn't be. They were reflections of experiential knowledge, encoded in complex conditional logic and weighting factors that responded to nuances the raw data alone couldn't capture. I'd pleaded for years for resources to build a proper knowledge transfer system, a living documentation project, but Brightmore saw it as a cost center, not an asset. They wanted a black box they could license, not a complex tool that required expert interpretation. Only I truly understood its depths, its sensitivities, its potential failure points if mishandled. And I had no intention of drawing them a map. I'd started at St. Jude's when it was just a well-regarded community hospital. The neurodiagnostic unit was competent, but conventional. Dr. Alastair Finch, the department head then a brilliant old-school neurologist, saw the potential in my early research on computational diagnostics. Build it, Layla. He'd encouraged me, securing pilot funding. Build something that sees what we miss. Over 2 decades, Falcon grew from a concept into the hospital's crown jewel, attracting complex cases from across the country. We published groundbreaking papers. Patient outcomes for specific rare diseases improved dramatically. When Dr. Finch retired, the hospital administration, while increasingly bureaucratic, still recognized Falcon's value. Then came Brightmore Health Partners 3 years ago. The language shifted. Patient outcomes became value propositions. Research became IP generation. Efficiency became the new god. My warnings about the risks of simplifying Falcon, of treating it like a plug-and-play device, were dismissed as resistance to change. My budget requests for robust documentation and specialized training were repeatedly denied. We need to standardize, Croft had declared in one of his first departmental meetings, his eyes sweeping over my team with dismissive appraisal. Samir had seen it coming. They don't value wisdom, Layla, he'd said months ago. They value scalability. Your work is bespoke, artisanal in a way. It's brilliant, but it doesn't fit their factory model. Protect yourself. I hadn't listened closely enough, convinced my results spoke for themselves. Apparently, they spoke a language Croft and Brightmore didn't understand, or chose not to. The first tremor occurred precisely 3 weeks after my departure. I was pruning roses in the garden, finding solace in the tangible, when my personal cell phone rang. Ben Carter. Layla. Thank God. His voice was tight with stress. We've got a problem. Falcon flagged 3 potential cases of cerebellar ataxia type for variants this week. Standard protocol. But the interpretations coming out, they're weird. Off. The confidence scores are high, but the correlating biomarker patterns don't match the heuristic profile checklists you developed. The new team, they just accepted the top-line AI output. Croft is pushing for rapid treatment initiation based on it. Ben, I said calmly, snipping a dead bloom. Did they cross-reference with the secondary diagnostic markers? Did they run the comparative analysis against the historical cohort data using the specific filters I established for CA4 variants? A pause. I don't think so. The new lead analyst said your filters were overly complex and computationally inefficient. He's running a simplified regression analysis that inefficient filter screens for subtle mitochondrial DNA heteroplasmy interference. Then, without it, the AI can misinterpret certain protein folding signals as CA4 markers, especially in patients with underlying metabolic stress. It's a known confounding factor I specifically coded Falcon to account for. My voice was level, but my hand gripping the pruning shears tightened. Oh God, Ben breathed. I tried to tell them the checklists were crucial, but they said the AI had evolved beyond needing manual checks. Then, I interrupted gently, I am no longer employed by St. Jude's. I cannot provide diagnostic consultation. But Layla, these are patients, and they are under the care of St. Jude's and Mr. Croft's new team. I trust they have a situation under control. I ended the call, my heart pounding. This wasn't just incompetence. It was arrogance bordering on malpractice. More calls followed. Helen from HR, offering escalating consulting fees, $500 an hour, then $800. Croft himself, his tone shifting from condescendingly collegial to strained. Voicemails piled up. Dr. Harris, Julian Croft. Minor query regarding the legacy code for the temporal lobe epilepsy module. Layla, it's Julian. We're seeing some anomalies in the predictive modeling for MS relapse rates. Perhaps a quick chat. Dr. Harris, Helen from HR again. We are authorized to offer a significant retainer, $10,000, simply for you to be on call for occasional guidance. Ben's texts became more frantic. 2 of the CA4 patients had adverse reactions to the initiated treatment. It wasn't CA4. Misdiagnosis confirmed. Another. Falcon data export for the National Rare Disease Registry is corrupted. Croft is blaming legacy code. I sat on my patio, sipping tea, the serene garden a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding miles away. Samir placed a hand on my shoulder. Are you okay? I'm thinking, I murmured, that they're discovering the true cost of efficiency. On the 4th week, an email arrived that changed everything. It wasn't from St. Jude's. It was from Dr. Lena Petrova, Chief Scientific Officer at the Heron Institute, a highly respected, heavily endowed private research center focused on neurological and immunological research. Dear Dr. Harris, I hope this email finds you well. I was recently made aware of your departure from St. Jude's Regional. Your work on Project Falcon, particularly the nuanced integration of heuristic clinical data with AI pattern recognition, has been groundbreaking and something we at Heron have followed with immense admiration for years. Heron is embarking on a major initiative to develop next-generation diagnostic platforms for complex, multifactorial neurological conditions. We believe your unique expertise is precisely what we need to lead this endeavor. Would you be open to discussing a potential role as Chief Diagnostic Strategist at the Heron Institute? We envision a position with significant resources, research autonomy, and the opportunity to build something truly revolutionary, properly documented and supported from the ground up. Sincerely, Dr. Lena Petrova. I read the email twice. It felt like stepping out of a suffocating room into clean, fresh air. I replied immediately, setting up a virtual meeting for the next day. That evening, my doorbell rang. Not the chime, but insistent, repeated pressing. Standing on my porch, looking harried, tie askew, was Julian Croft. Dr. Harris. Layla. Forgive the intrusion, he stammered, slicking back his hair. We have a critical situation. Falcon isn't just giving anomalous readings, it's becoming unstable. Whole modules are becoming inaccessible. The system is throwing integrity errors we can't decipher. Patient care is being compromised. We need you. I leaned against the doorframe, my expression unreadable. That sounds deeply concerning, Mr. Croft. It is. The board is concerned. Brightmoor is demanding answers. They've authorized me to offer you an emergency contract. Name your price. Reinstatement? A leadership role? Whatever it takes. I thought of the two boxes in my study. 22 years. I thought of nothing personal, just optimizing. I thought of the denied requests for documentation funding, the dismissal of experience as legacy. I thought of the misdiagnosed patients. I'm sorry to hear about your difficulties, Julian, I said, my voice quiet but firm. But as it happens, I have a meeting tomorrow morning to discuss a new opportunity. Something truly revolutionary, I believe. I closed the door gently on his stunned, slack-jawed face and went back inside to prepare for my meeting with Heron. A profound sense of clarity washed over me. Not triumph, not revenge. Just the quiet, unshakable conviction that I had made the right choice. They had sown the wind. Let them reap the whirlwind. The meeting with Dr. Petrova and the Heron Institute team exceeded my expectations. They weren't just paying lip service to my work. They understood its nuances, the challenges I'd faced, and crucially, the potential I hadn't been allowed to fully realize at St. Jude's. We don't want a black box, Dr. Harris, Petrova said, her eyes sharp and intelligent. We want to build transparent, interpretable diagnostic tools that empower clinicians, not replace them. We need your heuristic overlay philosophy, but embedded within a framework that allows for rigorous documentation, validation, and knowledge sharing. Build your ideal system with the resources you need. The offer was substantial. Director of the new Center for Computational Diagnostics, a generous research budget, a hand-picked team, and a salary significantly higher than my previous one. But more importantly, it offered respect and intellectual freedom. Why me? I asked, echoing Victor's question. There are brilliant AI specialists, younger minds. Petrova smiled warmly. Layla, anyone can train an algorithm on data. Very few people possess the deep clinical wisdom to know which data matters, how it connects, and how to translate that intuition into something a system can learn from without losing the nuance. We don't just need a coder. We need an architect with vision and experience. We need you. I accepted the position the next day. Meanwhile, the situation at St. Jude's was spiraling. Ben, who had resigned a week after our phone call, I can't ethically work under Croft anymore, he'd told me, kept me informed sporadically. Falcon was now largely non-functional. The bright young minds had apparently attempted a forced system reset based on an incomplete understanding of its architecture, triggering cascading data corruption. Patient records were fragmented, historical diagnostic correlations lost. They'd brought in a high-priced external IT consultancy, specialists in disaster recovery, who were struggling to even map the system's original design. It's worse than just code, Layla, Ben told me over coffee one afternoon. He'd found something disturbing before he left, buried in Croft's secured project files he'd inadvertently gained access to during a server migration. Croft wasn't just trying to cut costs. He was actively working on a proposal to Brightmore to patent key components of Falcon, specifically the heuristic interpretation modules, under his name and the new teams. He was systematically sidelining you and trying to reverse engineer the secret sauce to claim it as a new, optimized commercial product. He showed me drafts of proposals, emails between Croft and Brightmore executives discussing IP capture strategies and legacy knowledge extraction before my phased-out transition. One email from Croft boasted, Harris's methods are opaque, likely intentionally, to maintain control. Once we isolate the core logic, we can rebuild it as a scalable, licensable asset under the Brightmore banner. Her departure accelerates this process. It all clicked into place. The dismissal of my documentation requests, the hiring of analysts over clinicians, the push for standardization. It wasn't just about saving money. It was about seizing control of my life's work. Why show me this now, Ben? I asked, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Because I just accepted a senior research position, he grinned, at the Heron Institute. Dr. Petrova mentioned you were building a team? He sobered. And because the fallout, it's hitting patient care hard. The Regional Oversight Board is launching an investigation into St. Jude's diagnostic failures. Croft is trying to blame everything on your undocumented legacy system. A month into my tenure at Heron, as we were laying the groundwork for our new diagnostic platform, Dr. Petrova called me into her office. An unexpected visitor was with her, Dr. Eleanor Vance, the chair of the Regional Health Oversight Board. Dr. Harris, Dr. Vance said, her expression serious, "We are facing a significant crisis at St. Jude's. The failure of their neurodiagnostic system is having severe consequences. Mr. Croft has been suspended pending investigation, but the technical problems remain critical. The external consultants are lost. They admit the system's core logic seems intrinsically tied to undocumented clinical heuristics." She paused, looking directly at me. "Dr. Petrova has informed us that you are the original architect. St. Jude's board has formally requested assistance from Heron, specifically requesting your involvement in the recovery effort. They understand this is delicate." Lawrence leaned forward. "Layla, Heron is considering a formal partnership to assist St. Jude's, potentially even absorbing the neurodiagnostic unit if necessary to ensure continuity of care. But it only makes sense if the core intelligence of Falcon can be salvaged and ethically integrated into a transparent, properly managed framework. That requires its original architect." The irony was staggering. The system they discarded, the expertise they devalued, now the only lifeline they had left. And they needed me to help them grasp it. "Would you be willing, Dr. Petrova asked gently, to lead the diagnostic recovery and integration team under Heron's banner? On your terms." I thought of the patients caught in the middle. I thought of the principles Dr. Finch had instilled in me. I thought of the chance to rebuild Falcon correctly, ethically, transparently. "Yes," I said finally. "I would be willing, but I have conditions. Absolute transparency. Full access and control over the technical recovery. A dedicated team, including Ben Carter. Funding for comprehensive documentation and cross-training from day one. And a formal, public acknowledgement from St. Jude's board regarding the failures in management and oversight that led to this crisis." Dr. Vance and Dr. Petrova looked at each other, then back at me. "Agreed," Dr. Vance said. "Completely agreed." 5 months later, I stood not in my old office, but in the newly refurbished wing of St. Jude's, now designated the Heron St. Jude Center for Advanced Neurodiagnostics. The integration was underway. Falcon wasn't being simply resurrected, it was being reborn. Its core AI was sound, but we were meticulously rebuilding the heuristic layers, this time with rigorous documentation, validation protocols, and built-in interpretability guides. The bright young minds were gone. Croft was permanently dismissed. Several Brightmore executives were replaced. The St. Jude staff who remained worked alongside my Heron team, including Ben, now my deputy director. There was a palpable sense of relief mixed with humility among the St. Jude's veterans. One afternoon, Helen from HR stopped me in the hallway. "Dr. Harris," she said quietly, "I just wanted to apologize for my part in everything. We were following directives, but we should have understood the value of what we were losing." "Thank you, Helen," I replied sincerely. "The important thing is that we learn and ensure patient care is always the primary focus." A year after the Heron intervention, the center was fully operational, exceeding Falcon's previous accuracy rates and handling more cases than ever, but with transparency and collaborative clinical oversight at its core. We were publishing again, training fellows, and most importantly, providing reliable diagnoses for patients who desperately needed answers. Samir joined me for a hospital charity gala. As we stood overlooking the city lights, Dr. Petrova approached us. "Layla," she said, smiling, "the board officially approved the expansion funding. Your living documentation initiative is setting a new standard for the Institute." I felt a quiet satisfaction, deeper and more resonant than any fleeting sense of vindication. I hadn't needed to seek revenge, although Croft got what he deserved. My work, done meticulously, ethically, and with a deep understanding of its complexities, had ultimately spoken for itself. The value wasn't just visible, it was foundational. And sometimes, the silent symphony of competence, though ignored for a time, eventually finds its audience and proves impossible to dismiss. The cost of losing it, as St. Jude's learned, was far greater than the price of sustaining it.